Shalom, welcome to the Jewish Task Force, J.T.F. I'm Chaim ben Pesach, and we have another program with the great David ben Moshe. This is going to be a very difficult program, an important one, but a difficult program for me to do because, as you know, we're supporting Moshe Feiglin and the Zehut party in Israel's political process. That's the party that we support, and that's the person that we're in close contact with. 4 Israeli soldiers were blown up and murdered in Rafiach in the Gaza district about 12 hours before we're doing this program. One of those 4 soldiers who was blown up and murdered was Moshe Feiglin's grandson. So this is a very painful and difficult program for us, certainly for me to do, because we love Moshe Feiglin and his magnificent family, and this really is very painful for us. And the person responsible for those murders is Bibi Netanyahu and his government and the people in his government. They're responsible for those murders. And we also have important things that David ben Moshe always brings up. But before we get to all of that, this program is dedicated to a refuah shlema, complete recovery for Sharon Mitman, Shlomo ben Sarah, Dorit bat Sarah, Reuven ben Shoshana, Ruth bat Sarah, Liat bat Shifra, Niv ben Bina, and Yitzchak ben Sarah, and to Ilui Neshamot, elevating of the souls, for Yair Levin, Malka bat Meir, Allegra bat Shlomo, Daniel Nankin, Victor Chazdai, Pesach Zev ben Dov, Lunita Adler, Shifra Hoffman, Ruben Hoffman, Barry Hoffman, Harab Mir Kahana, Rab Binyamin Kahana, Tzipora Fegi bat Liba, Yosef ben Meir, Robert Mitman, Dennis Shore, Helen Friedman, and Charles Zolat. Moshe Feiglin, whom we support in Israel's political elections, who's the head of the Zehut party. And Zehut means identity because he wants to restore Jewish identity. Moshe Feiglin is a Jewish hero who started the protests against the Oslo agreements in the 1990s. The Oslo agreements were the agreements where they brought the Arab Hitler, Yasser Arafat, and tens of thousands of Muslim Nazi terrorists, armed Muslim Nazi terrorists into Israel, and said, this is peace now. We're bringing them in. This is peace. This is how you make peace. 40,000 armed terrorists from Fatah and the PLO were brought in together with Arafat. And the protests against this were started by Moshe Feiglin and an organization called Zu Artzenu. Zu Artzenu means this is our land. Because the Oslo agreements basically said, you know what? The Muslims and the Arabs are right. This is all Muslim land. It's not enough that there are 57 Muslim countries in the world, that they have 3,000 times as much land as the Jews in their 57 countries. That's not enough. Even the tiny little Jewish homeland, this really belongs to the Muslims. Everything belongs to the Muslims. The Jews have no rights to anything. That's basically what the Oslo agreements said. They wanted to transfer over the biblical heartland of Israel to the PLO terrorists and create a PLO terrorist state. That means the Jews have no rights at all in their own homeland. And so Moshe Feiglin started a movement of civil disobedience, just like Martin Luther King and Mahatma Gandhi, who are hailed as great heroes in the Western world.
Don't forget that great hero, Nelson Mandela.
Yeah, well, Nelson Mandela didn't do civil disobedience. Nelson Mandela openly engaged in terrorism. And Martin Luther King and Mahatma Gandhi claimed to be nonviolent, civil disobedient protesters, which was also not true. But anyway, they claimed to be. And they're considered to be great heroes in the Western world today. And you're right, Nelson Mandela, who's a terrorist, is also hailed as a great hero today in the Western world. In any event, Moshe Feiglin did the same thing in Israel with civil disobedience in Israel. They blocked all the roads and all the highways in Israel and blocked main streets to protest the Oslo agreements. And they were arrested and they were beaten brutally by the Israeli Bolshevik police. And Moshe Feiglin was put on trial for insurrection. And eventually he was given a probation sentence for that, but still he was put on trial, and it was a big. They created a big protest movement that started the opposition to the Oslo agreements, largely as a result of what Moshe Feiglin did. The polls showed that a majority of Israelis finally turned against the Oslo agreements and turned against the Rabin Perez government. Moshe Feiglin is the one that did all of that woke people, that was able to awaken people to these dangers. And then later on, he continued his political activities, and now he has been the voice of truth since the war in Gaza, since what happened on October 7th in Israel, where Arab Muslim Nazis did what Muhammad did in the Quran. They raped Jewish women. They cut the heads off of Jewish babies. They cut the organs and body parts off of live Jews whom they captured. They burned Jewish babies alive in front of their parents. They committed atrocities so cruel and so unspeakable that the German Nazis would certainly be very proud of them. They really excelled in terms of Nazism. Everything they did was the type of things that Muhammad and his followers did in the Quran and the Hadith, and Muslims are commanded to do the same thing. So Moshe Feiglin has been a voice saying, we've got to throw these people out. We got to throw them out of Gaza. We've got to get them to leave. They've got to go.
It's very liberal of him calling them people.
Okay, I'm calling them people. I don't know that he actually has called them monsters. He's called them miflatzot in Hebrew. He's called them monsters. And he has said that there's no difference between Gaza and Hamas. Anyway, he's the only voice of truth in Israeli politics today, the only one who's been telling the truth. And we've been in close contact with him. I communicate with him on WhatsApp. And, today we were informed that he lost his grandson, who was fighting in one of the elite Israeli army units. Only 15% of the Jews in Israel are from the religious nationalist camp, but they're the majority of the soldiers that fight in combat units in the Israeli army. They're the ones holding Israel on their shoulders. They're literally holding up the whole state. And Moshe Feiglin is the true voice of the idealists in that camp. He's the one that defends the Hilltop youth. He's the one that defends all the Jewish heroes. He's the one that speaks out when they put Jews in prison just because of their political opinions. He's a very brave, noble person. And there are times when we have had political differences with him. He's not a Kahanist. So there are times when we had political differences with him, although he certainly has moved to the right lately, and he's been saying Rabbi Kahana was right, which in the past he wasn't against Rabbi Kahana, but I don't recall him actually saying Rabbi Kahana was right. He's praising Rabbi Kahana and saying Rabbi Kahana was right. So he's the person we've been supporting, and the tragedy of him losing his grandson. And this is after his son, about 15 years ago, was in a terrible accident, a terrible car accident, and had brain damage and other problems. And his son is functioning now, but with difficulty. He's had a lot of problems with his son, who also, as a result of that accident, developed severe epilepsy. So he's had a lot of troubles with his son, a lot of troubles with his wife. His wife is in bad health. So he's had a very tough life, a very, very tough life. And yet, I don't know how he does it. I don't know where he finds the strength to go on and lead movements that are difficult to lead. And he comes under fire from the establishment and defends all the good causes and stands up for the truth in a world where only if you lie, it's easy. If you lie, everything's easy. If you're a liar and a thief and a lowlife, whether it's in politics in Israel or in America, then everything goes easy. It's smooth sailing if you're a liar. The worse a liar you are, the more successful you're going to be. The bigger a crook you are, the more successful you're going to be in politics. But he's not like that. He's the opposite. And he's really suffered a lot in his life. So our hearts go out to him before the holiday of Shavuot. And of course, I sent him my condolences, and he did respond, but on WhatsApp. But it's a very painful, difficult thing, and because we have two basic things that we're hoping for to turn the situation around. One is the Hilltop youth in the field, because we have to have facts on the ground. We've got to establish Jewish communities on the ground to prevent the Arabs from taking over Judea and Samaria through illegal building. And the Hilltop youth communities are the only hope for doing that. They're the only ones who broke out of the 3%. As we've said on the show many times, Jews are only permitted to live in 3% of Judea and Samaria. Judea and Samaria is the biblical heartland of Israel. And the Jews, they told the Jews, you can only live in 3%. You're not allowed to live anywhere outside that 3%. And of course, if that happens, that the other 97% can turn into a Palestinian terrorist state, which would be suicide for Israel. And that's exactly what was happening until the Hilltop youth broke out of the 3% and said, we're not listening to these rules. We're going to establish communities, and we're going to build on these strategic hilltops, whether you like it or not. And they went out there and they built dozens and dozens, and then the Israeli army and Israeli police came and destroyed their hilltop communities because they want to hand it over to the Arab terrorists. And the Hilltop heroes go back and build again and again and again. And that's what J.T.F. has been financing and funding. And since J.T.F. got into the picture, the number of Hilltop communities that cut Arab territorial continuity in Judea and Samaria have doubled in the past 3 years since J.T.F. has gotten involved. In the past 3 years, we sent them approximately $2 million. So, we're trying to help them as best we can. And that's one thing we're doing. Facts on the ground, Hilltop. So whether we have politicians on our side or not, we're going to have facts on the ground to resist a Palestinian terrorist state. And these Hilltop heroes are making a big difference in Judea and Samaria. Tens of thousands of Arabs have left their homes and abandoned and have left the land of Israel completely because of the Hilltop youth. Because the Hilltop youth are grazing all over and establishing communities. It makes it difficult for the Arabs to take over and for the Arabs to do what they want to do there. So the Arabs give up and leave. Tens of thousands have left because of that. And they're the ones who say it's because of the Hilltop youth that they're leaving. They're the ones who have said that. And so have the late Joe Biden and the European Nazis and all these other, they impose sanctions on the Hilltop youth. America and Europe have been imposing sanctions on individuals in Israel just for living in Judea and Samaria. And all of the individuals that have been sanctioned are all Hilltop youth. So we're trying to help them and strengthen them. That's absolutely essential to Israel's very survival. And the second thing is in the political arena. The political arena, the only real thing we have is Moshe Feiglin. He's what we've got. He's the only card we have to play. And our hearts go out to him. Very sad, very tragic. His grandson takes after him. Brave, noble. Moshe Feiglin was also a combat soldier in the Israeli army. Now he's 61 years old now, but he was a combat soldier in the Israeli army. Also, a family of heroes. Just a family of heroes. That's who J.T.F. supports. And I mentioned that Bibi Netanyahu, by the way, his grandson's name is Yair Levin. Alav HaShalom, Zichrono Livracha. That means may he rest in peace and may his memory be immortalized. Over 600 soldiers have been slaughtered since the October 7th attack coming out of Gaza. Over 600 soldiers have been slaughtered in this war. this is a war that could have been, Israel could have won in 2 or 3 days. In several days, Israel could have won the war. Easily. But you can't because the world doesn't like it, and the late Joe Biden doesn't like it, and this one and that one, and this excuse and that excuse, and Netanyahu. He's deliberately let this war drag on for 8 months because he knows that as soon as the war is over, there's going to be a commission that's going to investigate how October 7th was able to happen. The Israeli army spends tens of billions. The Israeli military and the Israeli Defense Department get tens of billions of dollars in their budget. And they couldn't stop primitive Arab terrorists from coming in and slaughtering whole communities in southern Israel. They couldn't even get together planes, tanks, something to come and defend. It took them 24 hours to get the army. The army was unable to respond for 24 hours. What type? Right on the dangerous border there? Is this what Israel spends tens of billions of dollars for? What a joke. And so Netanyahu knows there's going to be a commission that's going to find him guilty. And he knows there are going to be elections, and the polls show that he's going to lose the election. So he is stalling as long as possible so that people's memories will fade, and just stalling and hoping that he'll be able to somehow ride this out. And so for 8 months, he's continuing a war unnecessarily that Israel could have won overnight. Not overnight, but within several days for sure. Israel defeated all the Arab armies in the Middle East in 6 days in 1967, when there were 2.5 million Jews in Israel. Now there are over 7 million Jews in Israel. He's the one feeding all the terrorists in Gaza. All the American aid that's going to Gaza, of course, it goes to the terrorists. The terrorists control Gaza. This is where American aid and fuel shipments and everything to keep the terrorists going, fighting. And he's allowing this, Netanyahu. If he had cut all this, if he had cut off everything, if he had gone immediately to south to cut off on the Egyptian border, because the Egyptians smuggle in assistance to help the terrorists, if he had cut off the southern border and had cut off all of their other lines of supply, within days, they would have been dying of thirst in Gaza. They would have been dying of hunger and thirst. And they would have no fuel and no ability to fight. And the Israeli army coming in with full force to slaughter all the terrorists and their supporters in the population. And at that time, the world was supporting Israel in the first few days. Israel could have done it and would have had a lot less condemnation than they're getting now. So now they're getting more condemnation and more problems from the world and more pressure than ever, and not winning. And over 600 soldiers have been murdered here. Now you may wonder, tens of billions of dollars for a country the size of Israel for their military, where does all that money go? It goes to salaries. A lot of it is wasted on salaries for these left-wing generals and other pigs, traitor pigs. Do you know that the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in the United States, the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in the United States, and in Israel, in Hebrew, that's called Haramat-Kal. The chief of the military, it's called Haramat-Kal in Hebrew. That's the acronym for it. You know that the Haramat-Kal in Israel gets more money, earns more money, has a bigger salary and a bigger pension than his counterpart, the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in America? America's 50 times the size of Israel in population. 50 times as big as Israel in population. And the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in Israel gets bigger salary than the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in the giant country like America? This is unbelievable. The soldiers are given gigantic salaries and payoffs. And the politicians, if you think we have corruption in America, you can't imagine what goes on in Israel and what religious soldiers have to go through. Now, the soldiers that are fighting, the average soldier that's fighting, they're heroes. The average Israeli soldier, the Israeli soldiers that are fighting, they're heroes. They're great heroes. They're like lions. They're very courageous and great fighters. and very brave and very patriotic. But the leadership on top are all leftist scum. Just like the leadership of the American military are all leftist scum, are all New World Order leftist scum. You can't get it. You can't achieve a high military position in any Western country unless you're leftist scum, unless you believe in the New World Order. You can never achieve a high rank in the military. Anyway, and by the way, Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich, because everybody always says Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, they're the two right-wingers in the Israeli, complete phonies. Itamar Ben-Gvir, he did interviews last week saying Israel should increase its military pressure on the Hamas terrorists. That's his solution. Increase military pressure. Increase military pressure. Moshe Feiglin says wipe them out together with all the population that supports them. Wipe them out. That's Moshe Feiglin. And he's been saying that since October 7th. Just wipe them out. And Israel can do it if they want to. They're not using 1% of their military prowess. Itamar Ben-Gvir says, oh, I like what Netanyahu's doing, but I just wish he would do more. And he should cut off, and he says, humanitarian aid, we should, he has a saying, he says this in Hebrew, he says, siyua humanitari tmurat siyua humanitari. In other words, humanitarian aid in exchange for humanitarian aid. If you want us to give you humanitarian aid, you got to give some of the humanitarian aid to the hostages. That's his solution. With Feiglin, there'll be no so-called humanitarian aid to these Nazi butchers. None. They'll be eliminated once and for all if he's given power. Ben-Gvir, Smotrich, Netanyahu, all frauds. And if you agree with this message, I hope you do, then you got to support us, because this is the only place where you're going to hear a message like this. We're the only Jewish organization and Jewish voice that gives you a message like this and that is actually doing something about it on the ground. Because no one else outside of Israel, no one else is giving a penny to the Hilltop youth. No one, as far as I know, except for us. And the Hilltop youth, that's where the action is if you want to save the land of Israel from an Arab takeover. And I'm going to, even though it's very hard for me to do this, I'm going to end off by just saying, because it's obviously this very grim message I'm giving here, but I'm going to end off by saying, we will win in the end. Because God promises us that in the Bible. Remember, this is the God that brought us back to Israel after 2,000 years. This is the God that said that 5 of ye shall chase 100 of them, and 10 of ye shall put 10,000 of them to flight. That's happened. That we're going to turn the desert into a garden. That the desolate cities will become habitable again. That the whole world will be against Israel. Am levadad yishkonu v'goyim lo yitchashav. Lo, this is a nation that shall dwell alone and not be reckoned among the nations. Everything that has been said in the prophecies, all coming true. You got to be blind not to see this. Blind. And what it says in the prophecies, it says in the end, the Jews are going to wake up. Something's going to wake them up. And they're going to have real Jewish leaders. And the whole situation will turn around, and then God will intervene on their behalf. And among the Gentiles, the evil will be destroyed, and the righteous Gentiles, they're going to be the ones who are going to survive. And by the way, the evil Jews will also be destroyed. And the righteous Jews will survive. The righteous are the ones who are going to survive, and the evil people are going to get what's coming to them. That's what the prophets promise. And everything the prophets promise is coming true before our very eyes. So wake up and understand that. The faster we wake up, the faster we understand that, and the faster we have real Jewish leadership in Israel, and the faster we support the Hilltop Youth heroes and the Jews that are worthy of support, the faster we do that, the faster we bring final redemption to the world. The fact that we're the only ones giving you this message is so pathetic. So pathetic. What type of world is this? Everybody should be saying what we're saying. Everybody should be doing what we're doing. But the day will come when the Jewish people will all sound like Moshe Feiglin, like the Hilltop Youth, and like J.T.F. That day will come. That's what the prophets promise us. That's what God promises us. And God is not a politician. God keeps his word, always. Actually, there is a rule. There are bad prophecies. There are prophecies something bad is going to happen, and a prophecy that something good is going to happen. A prophecy that something bad is going to happen can be canceled if the people change their ways beforehand. If people wake up and change their ways, bad prophecies that terrible things are coming up, that can be stopped. It can be turned around and stopped and canceled. In some cases. In some cases. Why I say in some cases? Because sometimes when Menashe, the king of Yehuda, for instance, spilled a lot of blood, murdered a lot of righteous Jews, Hashem, even when the Jews did repent after that, Hashem refused to forgive, because you spill blood, you murder innocent people, that, you can't bring the dead back when you do that. But so in some cases, when Jews do turn around, and Hashem is clearly giving us Israel a chance to turn around now and to save itself, that's clearly happening now, when bad prophecies can be stopped and can be canceled. Good prophecies are never canceled. This is a loving God, a God filled with love and compassion. And when he gives his prophets a good message, that will always happen. That will never be canceled. Good prophecies always, bad prophecies sometimes can be canceled, but good prophecies always come true in the end. That's the rule in the Bible. And so we can be sure that the day will come when there'll be things a lot better than what most of us can imagine. A world of eternal life, a world where justice reigns and righteousness prevails and evil is defeated and crushed forever, and truth is something that everybody recognizes and understands. And people have knowledge of God, it says, like the waters fill the seas. It's going to be a wonderful world that we can't even imagine what a wonderful world it's going to be. But that eventually will happen. So there are bright days ahead. If we just do what's right, we can bring those bright days as quickly as possible. We're trying to avoid unnecessary suffering, and until then, and we can bring those bright days to us. We can bring those bright days to us, to our loved ones, to the world, if we just do what is necessary. And what all of you know is the truth. You know what I'm saying is true. You know that the cause that we're speaking about here is just. And so there's no excuse, there's no reason not to be part of this and not to help. If you want to help the Hilltop Youth, there are two ways you can do it. One is you can go to our Hebrew main page, which is hayamin.org. Now, hayamin.org is in Hebrew because it's our Hebrew main page, but there's a donate button in English, big donate button in English on top. You click on the donate button in English, and you can, in several minutes, easily and conveniently donate to help the Hilltop Youth. If you don't want to do it online, if you want to do it through the regular mail, you can do it by sending checks and money orders made out to J.T.F., and you send it to our post office box, which is J.T.F. P.O. Box 650327, Fresh Meadows, New York 11365. 100% of our budget goes to the struggle of the Hilltop Youth and the struggle to save the land of Israel. David?
Well, while this is going on in Israel, at UCLA, the Muslims and their stupid left-wing supporters have beaten up a rabbi from Israel. Over in England, one Muslim man was screaming with a big crowd there that the British police are cowards. They bring dogs, and if they bring dogs, we're going to kill the dogs, because in Islam, dogs are dirty animals. And This guy was shouting that we're not afraid of death. We love death. So if he loves death, why doesn't somebody kill him? Maybe one of his own people, make him a martyr. But that's Islam around the globe. And Muslims in New York are taking over a lot of the streets and making anti-Semitic, threatening to kill Jews. That man in England that was making the speech, he said, England is no longer a country for you. Get out. He was telling the Jews to get out because the Muslims are coming, and you can thank the Western governments for bringing these Arabs in. The Muslims in Italy are attacking everyday people, as many years ago Chaim warned they would. They knifed a few Germans, including a police officer in Germany. And they're attacking police in Paris and in London. So this is what you get. First, when there's only a few, it's quiet. Then they start making some noise as their population grows. And finally, they start getting violent when they have the numbers to support that violence. And we're going to see that here in America, too. And this is a word of warning that has nothing to do with politics or current events. This is something you have to watch out for. If you're unaware, I just want to make you aware. In Florida, 3 people 2 days ago were attacked by bull sharks. If you don't know what a bull shark is, it's a 7 to 9 foot shark. It's highly aggressive. It's big and broad, which is why it's called a bull shark. And it has the highest testosterone level of any shark anywhere, including the great white tiger sharks, which are bigger. The bull shark has another unique feature. And this is where my warning comes. If you think you can go swimming in a river that opens up to the ocean, or in a lake that follows through into a river down to the ocean, bull sharks are not bothered by fresh water. And in, I think it was 1911, possibly 1915, some bull sharks went up a canal in New York where the water changed from salt water to fresh water, and they killed a bunch of kids up in fresh water, and nobody understood what happened to those kids. They knew something happened in the water because the kids disappeared, but they finally figured out it was bull sharks on their way up into fresh water, because now they're starting to think bull sharks may have their pups, their babies, up in fresh water. And more recently, just a few weeks ago, a bull shark was spotted in a river in Illinois. So you're not safe anywhere if it opens to the ocean, because fresh water doesn't stop bull sharks. And remember, they're highly aggressive. Their normal size is 7 to 9 feet long, which is big enough. But the largest one ever caught was 13 feet long. So just keep that in mind. Unless you're a leftist, then forget what I said. Did you all see Joe Biden at the Normandy ceremony in France? He got out of his limo and he's looking around like, where is this? And he's looking around like, what am I doing here? What is this? They took him onto the stage where he was with the president of France, Macron, and his wife, and Jill Biden was there. And I don't know if Biden spoke or not. He wanted to sit down. He would have been the only one sitting on the platform. And eventually he turned and walked off, and Jill Biden escorted him off. I don't know if he had an accident in his pants or anything, but as president of the United States, he should have been there for the whole ceremony, but they escorted him off the stage. And this is an embarrassment. He's on the world stage. So how can you let this go on? Some polls are showing 50 for Trump, 49 for Biden. How can this be? This man is an embarrassment. He doesn't know what he's doing or where he is. He can't walk. And the reason Time calls him the late Joe Biden is because he's dead from the neck up. He's not doing too good from the neck down either.
By the way, there are polls that show Biden leading also.
Yeah, this is insanity. Well,
did you see him at the Juneteenth today?
no, I don't follow that at all.
Okay, well, it was on Fox News. He was standing next to Kamala Harris, and Kamala Harris's self-hating Jewish husband. And he's there, and there's a black guy standing next to him. And then next to Kamala Harris's Jewish self-hating husband, there's a black man with a beard in a dress, wearing a dress, a transgender wearing a dress. And there's a huge crowd in back of them, and then suddenly somebody starts, a song, one of their very nice June 19th songs. One of their nice songs for the June 19th celebration. Yeah, yeah, a nice song, and everybody starts dancing. Everybody, and he's like this. He freezes, Joe Biden. You see a picture of him freezing. He doesn't know what's going on. What is this? What's everybody dancing? What's going on? Where am I? What's going on? He froze. He was like frozen there. He didn't know where he was. And so the black guy that was standing next to him put his arm around him and is talking to him and reassuring him, and he starts smiling, but he doesn't know where he is. He doesn't know what's going on. He froze. This is the person who has the nuclear codes. He has the codes to 10,000 nuclear warheads that can destroy all of humanity. This is beyond. Hollywood could not create a movie like this. You couldn't create a scenario more absurd than this anywhere. It's beyond. It's just a writer, a screenwriter, someone writing some fiction or fantasy, you could never create a fiction more absurd than this. This is beyond human belief. And this happened today, the June 19th celebration, and he's there. Frozen. He didn't know, what is this? Why are people dancing? What's this? They're standing to the side, and Kamala's dancing, the cackling hyena Kamala Harris, and her self-hating Jewish husband is dancing, and then next to his self-hating Jewish husband, there's a black guy with a beard and a dress, the people at the ceremony. He's dancing too. This is literally what you have. You see it in the picture. He was wearing a dress. He's a transgender, and he has a beard, and he's dancing. Woo, yeah! And they're dancing, and they're all and Joe Biden is frozen. The late Joe Biden is just like a cadaver. I mean, he's just standing there watching. This is the president of the United States, and he's running pretty much even in the polls with Donald Trump. Wow. Yeah, go ahead, David.
Well, it only goes to prove what Europe told us when we created this country. The masses are too stupid to elect their own leaders. I just wanted to get back to the Normandy commemoration event. It was the 80th anniversary. And a 102-year-old veteran from my town who was there to watch the flag raised on Iwo Jima. Not that he was one of the flag raisers, they're all gone. But he was there and saw the flag being raised on Mount Suribachi. He wanted to go to the Normandy commemoration. And at 102 years old, he died on the way there. What a shame. I'm just wondering, being he's from my town, was he living in a nursing home? And did we perform for him and not even know it? Also, Joe Biden, of course, he didn't do this on his own because he doesn't know where he is. But his staff had him release more of the strategic petroleum reserves to get the price down a little bit because it's an election year. Do you think they would have done that if it wasn't an election year and he was trailing in the polls? Well, the price of gas dropped from at least in my town, $3.69 to $3.55 because he released a whole bunch of, at least 1 million barrels of petroleum to lower the price of it, because people are hurting. But if you look at the fuel is still up around 50%. Eggs are up around 50%. Beef is up around 40%. Sugar is up something like 252%. And there's a whole list. I don't have the list. I don't want to read it, but you know, you pay for gas, you pay for fuel. These are things you must have. You don't have to have a new couch just because your couch is a little worn out. You don't have to have a new TV because the new TVs have a better picture. The real inflation, which the government will never admit, is food and fuel, the things you must have to survive.
By the way, releasing the strategic oil, that the effect of that on the market is
minimal.
Not only minimal, but it won't last more than like 20.
It won't last, and
it won't last for 24 or 48 hours. It's a complete joke.
And that strategic reserve that we're using up to win votes, that's needed in case of an emergency or in case of war. It was bought at low price under Trump, and we're dumping it and going to have to replace it at high price under this fool that's the president. And he's far worse now than he was in 2020. And in 2020, he was pretty bad.
Biden, by the way, under Trump, America was a net exporter of oil by the time Trump left office. America had achieved full energy independence and was a net exporter of oil. Now, once again, America is dependent on foreign oil from countries like Iran and all these other countries, which of course the Biden administration supports.
And you've seen veterans who want you to donate for this or donate for that, and they'll give you an artificial poppy if you donate. You see them in front of stores. Sometimes they set up tables. Do you know where that came from? That's from the First World War. Some of the American soldiers and some of the British and French buried in the cemeteries there, in the war cemeteries. Poppies started growing on a few of the graves and just covered the grave with poppies. And that's where that idea came from. Meanwhile, in South Bend, Indiana, queers attacked a teen boy for no reason. And they beat him up. And we tolerate this. I'm sure nothing happened to them because they're gay. And the teen was beaten up, but nothing happens. Police don't make arrests, and the DAs just let them out.
If straight people had beaten up someone who's gay, you can imagine what a story that would be.
Yeah, that would be page one for a few days. And I think the Republicans are still playing by the old rules when the Democrats have no rules. And it would be nice if the Republicans all got together, went home this weekend, and tried to locate their spines. Nixon got into a lot of trouble for erasing 30 seconds of tape. Meanwhile, nothing happens to Democrat Hillary, who erased servers and 30,000 emails and what was on her Blackberries. Nothing happens to her because she's a Democrat, and the Republicans don't press this because they're spineless.
What about Joe Biden? There's a classified documents case against Trump in Florida. Biden had classified documents in Delaware, and he wasn't president. Trump was president. President is allowed to have access to documents while he's president, at least. Biden was a senator and vice president. He took all these documents and brought them to his home in Delaware, completely unsecured, sitting in the garage there. They were sitting in the garage there. Where's the documents case against Joe Biden? I'm just wondering about that. I always wondered about that.
Democrats are immune. They get their way and the Republicans say nothing. and do nothing. And then we have a former far left-wing attorney, and Chaim knows him well because of the debates with Rabbi Kahana, Alan Dershowitz, who has moved quite a bit. He's, let's call him slightly left of center now. And he says, Alvin Bragg, Fat Albert, yeah. The DA of New York should be on trial, not Trump. And I don't know if you saw the Miss Alabama in Alabama. I don't know if Alabama goes this way. She's 400 pounds. This is to compete in Miss America. Miss Alabama is in the area of 400 pounds. She's between 375 and 425. And Miss Maryland is a man who looks like a woman, sort of. But what are they saying by this? First of all, these contests are something, they're anomalies from the past. There's no reason to hold them anymore, these beauty pageants. They're not beauty pageants. I don't know what they are anymore. If a 400-pound woman can win Miss Alabama, and Alabama, instead of one of those beautiful Southern belles.
And the most beautiful woman in Maryland is a man?
Yeah. Is that what they're saying? A man is more beautiful than a woman?
I guess.
And the women say nothing.
He's the most beautiful woman. He's the most beautiful woman in Maryland. Okay.
He, not this one, but a different he, is also the fastest woman swimmer, the fastest woman runner, the fastest woman high jump, and the fastest and the best woman wrestler. And the women are just a few that are a little more conservative, and especially those that compete are totally disgusted. And other than that, the feminists say nothing. They fought for women's rights for years. Some of them made ridiculous statements and went way too far, but you notice they say nothing. Just like black on black crime in Chicago. Where is Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton? They only talk when it's white on black crime. But meanwhile, there's a slaughter going on and they're nowhere to be found.
Well, at least they did speak up after October 7th in Israel, praising the Hamas rapists. Praising them and siding with the Hamas rapists. That's the feminists. That's the feminazis. Rush Limbaugh used to call them feminazis.
And that's accurate.
Praising the Hamas Nazi terrorist rapists and explaining why they support the Arabs against Israel, the Arab terrorists against Israel, who raped all of these Jewish women and little girls and committed and paraded naked Jewish women throughout the streets of Gaza, paraded them throughout the streets, stripped them of their clothes, paraded them throughout the streets while everybody beat them and attacked them and molested them before murdering them. And the feminist organizations, not a word of condemnation, and if in fact they support the Hamas terrorists.
Not a word from PETA about the dog that was coming down the driveway and the Arabs just killed it. These organizations, they're so phony. Well, I'm going to conclude with study. If you're a student, work hard. If you're an adult, working. And the government will distribute whatever you earn to those who didn't. Meanwhile, paying taxes in today's America is like having never-ending car payments on a car that won't run.
Yeah, it just reminds me of the endless. Have you noticed that almost every week, piecemeal, the late Joe Biden gives out more billions for so-called student loans, to cancel student loans?
That reminds me, what about those who went to trade school and had to pay for trade school, and in a few months they're out producing, unfortunately paying taxes, but they're out producing, paying their taxes, supporting families. How come nobody's paying their loans back?
Well, they're getting everybody, all these left-wing students at left-wing universities, especially for the left-wing universities. They're getting it. Everything's getting canceled so that we can have all the wonderful demonstrations for Hamas at Columbia, Yale, Harvard. Where, by the way, if you want to get a BA at Harvard or Yale, it can cost you up to $1 million. Up to $1 million in tuition now in those universities, that you'll have the privilege of going to school with the brilliant Yale and Harvard. They're brilliant students, you know. They're brilliant. When the Jews were there in the 50s and 60s, I went there with Rabbi Kahn in the 70s when he was invited to Yale Law School. By the way, they were brilliant. I mean, 17, 18-year-old Jewish kids, you couldn't believe, were brilliant minds. Now they have students there. They asked them, they went up to them, they asked them, because they're saying from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. So people went up to them and asked them. These are Yale and Harvard students who are getting tuition paid by the taxpayers, up to $1 million per student, paid by the taxpayers, so they can go to Yale and Harvard. They asked them, from the river to the sea, which river are you referring to? They said, the Mississippi. You know, and to the sea, which sea are you referring to? Is that a trick question? That was one of the answers. You know, I mean, none of them knew the answer. Which river, which sea? None of them knew the answer. Which river, which sea? They just knew they wanted to exterminate all the Jews, but they didn't know which river, which sea. Joe Biden is giving them all free tuition, $1 million per student. Isn't it nice to have the late Joe Biden in the White House and the cackling hyena Kamala Harris and her self-hating Judenrat capo Jewish husband? Isn't that wonderful to have them in the White House?
They're giving it, but it's you, the taxpayer, that's paying for it.
No, of course.
If their degree isn't worth for them to pay their loans back, it's certainly not worth for you to pay their loans back.
Well, you know, why we want to give degrees, Ivy League school degrees, to people, first of all, who are morons, who are demonstrating to destroy Israel. They don't even know where Israel is on the map. They're morons, ignoramuses, and evil Nazi ignoramuses, Nazis, cruel, monstrous Nazis that want to see the Jews slaughtered. And we want to give them degrees and everything else, and these evil universities that are coddling them. This is what Joe Biden, this is what your tax dollars are going for. This is what Joe Biden is spending your tax dollars on.
On one of the college campuses, an interviewer went, probably right-wing, young man, and he was asking the protesters, "What are you protesting today?" And most of them said, "I don't want to talk to you," because they didn't know the answer. Finally, he got one young girl who said, "I don't know, you better go speak to the ones that are running it." So she was there protesting and didn't even know what the protest was.
Yeah. Well, anyway, when are the good people going to come out? You never see, by the way, you very rarely see any counter protesters or any good people. You notice the good people don't come out. Good people are apathetic. That's why America's going down.
Apathetic, and they have to work for a living. They have to support a family, pay a mortgage.
Yeah, they have to do all those things, but you know, they have time for nonsense. But they don't have time to go out and do things to I think they would want to do things to save their country, to save society. That they don't have time for. So what do you expect? Do you don't think the evil people are going to win when you have something like that? You have a situation like that. The evil people are going to win. In your heart, you know we're right. And in your guts, you know they're nuts. For J.T.F. until next week, this is Chaim ben Pesach, and for David ben Moshe, Shalom.